Hey there, it's Jonas here from Das Element. And today I want to show you how you can set up the software for the very first time. So let's jump right in. Before we get started, let's have a quick look at the documentation page at the Das Elementary School. And you will find the setup page where we have this image, which shows us how everything works and how everything comes together. So we have the artist workstation. From that workstation, we point to a configuration file. This can either be done by using the UI and selecting the location of that config file, or for the pipeline TDs and IT people, you can use an environment variable to point to that config file. The configuration file holds the global information about the naming convention and which libraries to load. And the library exists of a library file. And inside that library file, we have a link to the database that's used. And we have a link to the data storage where our files are located, so the actual assets on disk. And this is called the link to the library root. And these are the things we have to set up now. So first we will define the configuration. After the configuration is done, we create our libraries. So let's get started. The first time you launch the software, you will see the welcome page. And here we can define two things. One is the file path to the configuration file. By default, this will be saved in a local user home directory. Or you can define a custom file path. And this can be, for example, on a network share. All right, let's go with the default location for now, which brings us to the preset page. So basically, there are two scenarios. One is that you want to reorganize and rename files and move them to a nice and tidy folder structure and naming convention. Or you want to preserve your original file and folder structure because your asset library is around for many, many years and your artists are familiar with the folder structure. So here we can define or choose a preset. And if we click Show Preview, we get an idea of how the final folder structure will look like after we ingest the assets. So inside the example library, which is the library root, the software will generate folders for the categories. And inside each category folder, it will generate the individual folders for assets. So Fire 001, Fire 0002, and with a sequential naming. And for each element, it will generate proxy files. So for example, in this case, if the main file is an EXR sequence or a movie file, it will generate a proxy QuickTime. It will generate a thumbnail and a film strip. And these are the proxy files that it will generate by default. That's the first preset. The second one is fairly similar. It's restructure and keep source name. So it will preserve the original file name compared to the one above where it will actually rename the files. So that's really up to you. So do you want to rename everything? Just so you know, it will always save the source file name and the file path to the source file in the database. So you can always back reference where assets came from. But sometimes it's handy to keep the original file name. That's really up to you. So the top ones are pretty similar. And the third one is preserve original file structure. This one comes in handy if you want to keep the files as they are and don't change anything. And here, if we look at the show preview, we can see that we have some folder structure and some subfolders in the original file name. And these will be untouched. It will not rename them. It will not move them. Everything stays as it is. But on the top layer, it will create a .proxies folder. And inside this .proxies folder, which should be hidden on Linux and macOS by default, it will generate the previews. All right. You also can go with a blank setup, but it's recommended to choose one of the presets from above. Let's go with the first one. We want to restructure and rename everything. Now we hit let's go. Now that we created the configuration file, it's time to create our first library. So we hit create library. We can give it a name. Let's call it elements. Click next. And now we can define the library root. The library root is the folder where the software expects all the files to be located. Here I have a mount resources library folder, and I can create a new folder called elements. And if I select that folder, it will set this folder as the library root, and all files will be copied into that folder. If we hit the advanced button, we can see that in the top part we have the library root, which is in this case defined for Windows. And at the bottom part we have library file. This is the library file that holds the information about which database to use for this library and which transcoding templates to use. If you want to define the library root for different operating systems, we can do this here. Or we can define it later in the settings. Let's continue, and this will bring us to the transcoding template presets. There are 3 options. First is restructure and rename. This will copy the source file to the library root. It will rename the file, and it will generate the proxy files. Or if you choose before to preserve your original file structure, you can select this preset, and this will keep the source file untouched, but it will render the proxy files to this .proxies folder. We will go with the restructure and rename preset for now, and continue to the database selection. Here you have different options. As a studio, it's recommended to go with a Postgres, a MySQL, or a MariaDB setup, because these have advantages if you have multiple users that need to read and write at the same time. If you're a single user or you just want to try out stuff and play around with the software, you can use the SQLite database, which is a simple file that doesn't require any IT work to set it up. So it's really simple file. It saves on disk, and that's all there is. It has some disadvantages. So if you want to use it on a network share, it might have issues. And if you want to use it with multiple users, especially if they want to read and write at the same time, that can be problematic from time to time. We will choose it for now. All right, let's create the library. The library was created, and now you see that it's empty. There are no items. And the view that we are currently seeing is the gallery view. On the top left, we have the gallery view. We have the ingest page where we can add new elements, and we have the settings page where we will configure everything. So let's add our first assets. In the ingest page, you have several options at the top. You can choose which library to ingest. You can load files or folders by clicking the button, or we have some predefined files here in some folder structure in the file explorer, and you can select these files and drag and drop them into the ingest page. The software will automatically create previews for you for each asset, which can be handy because you can see visually the preview of the media, and it extracts information from the files from the media metadata, for example, the width and the height, the color space information, or the video codec. In the ingest page, we do the tagging and we define at least one category for each element. This is the only time that the software forces you to do something, because we have to define at least one category for each element. The reason is after an element is ingested into the asset library, it is very rare that anybody ever changes this asset again, and we don't want to have an asset library that's not very well tagged. So the software enforces you to do the tagging here during the ingest phase. So if we look at that asset, get a preview, it is an explosion. As you can see, there are several predefined categories that you can use, and all of these ship with the software by default. So we select explosion category. The second part is to define the tags. And again, the software ships with tons and tons of predefined tags that you can use. And not only does it ship with the exact tags, so if we type in explosion, we get that same explosion tag, but you can also search for synonyms. For example, kaboom or bang. If we hit enter, it will return that explosion tag, which is pretty handy because we avoid that we have duplicated tags, that we have misspelled tags, and so on. Smoke, boom, and we have the smoke tag. You can copy and paste tags on other assets, and you can tag the entire list at once. So at the top, if we change the category for all elements, or if you want to set the tag for all elements, it will assign these tags for all list items. There are other features that the software assists you with. For example, if we look at the element at the very bottom, we can see that it's a Spark element that only has these 1-2 frames of Spark, and the software picked these frames to show you. So these are meaningful thumbnails. The software automatically picks for you. The same goes for this broken glass that's falling, which makes it easy for you to know what the element is and to tag it. Quick tip, if there is no category set and you simply type in and add a new tag, for example, broken glass, it will automatically set the category for you if it knows this category. Spark. Now after the tagging is done, we can choose transcoding style. This is a template that triggers certain transcoding templates in the background that will transcode the file and generate the proxy files for us. By default, we only have the copy and rename template. The top left, you can assign again all these transcoding templates for all list items. So after that's done, we can click ingest, and it will now register the file path to the database. It will copy and rename the source media. And after that's done, it will generate the proxy files, like the thumbnail, the proxy movie, and so on. As we can see, all dots are green, which indicate that the software successfully ingested the element and rendered the proxy files. By default, all these proxy generation tasks are performed on the local workstation that you're currently running the software on. Later in the settings, we can configure it so it will send all these render and transcoding jobs to the render farm, which will speed up the process of ingesting new elements. Let's head back to the gallery view, where we will now see our new assets. From here, you can do all sorts of things like drag and dropping the assets into your other application, for example, compositing software and so on. Or you can create collections of your favorite elements and much more other things, like if you want to edit elements, you can go into the edit view. You can assign new tags. And after this editing has been done, you have to save these changes. So these will actually be applied to the element. If you're in the edit mode, you can also re-render the proxy files if you made changes in the settings. Simply click the re-render button and it will submit these proxy jobs. You can also change the category. You can change the color space information. This is not the actual color space of the element. It is more like a text input field, which tells the user what color space this element has. Because if you do your custom transcoding tasks, only you know what the output color space is. So you can tell software here that if you convert it to some ACES format, that you did actually convert it to ACES. Let's rewrite these changes and have a look at this top bar. At the top bar, you can select the element library that you want to filter from. At the moment, we only have one library, but later we will have multiple ones. You can search for tags and categories. And these are all tags and categories that you can search for in your asset library. So here we see the new tag that we just created, and it will filter elements with this tag. We go Spark. We will find both elements that have either new tags or Spark. You can also search by the frame duration, the resolution, by rating, and so on. The left side, you have the view of the elements in a hierarchy tree structure. So the broken glass is a subcategory of destruction, and these are defined in the settings in the hierarchy tree view. Let's have a look how this folder structure now looks on disk. We have the main element, which got renamed to particle 001. And next to that main element, we have the proxy files. For example, the thumbnail and the QuickTime. The element is called particle 001, and it's living inside the particle folder. The top level here, we see the destruction, explosion, and particle category folders. And if we jump inside the explosion folders, we can see two elements. These are our two explosion elements. And we can see that these are named sequentially 0001 and 00002. But where is this defined and how can this be changed? Well, let's go to the settings page. Before we can make changes in the settings, we first have to understand two concepts. One is the naming convention and the folder structure, and the other one are the transcoding templates. The naming convention and the folder structure are configured in the path configuration. And the underlying idea is that we define in the global settings the overall naming convention, and on the library level, we override the parts that needs to be changed. For example, everything stays the same, but for a thumbnail and a proxy movie, we only want to change the file extension. Here in the path configuration, you will see a lot of these colorful boxes. And these are so-called path values. Think of these as tokens that can either have a fixed value or a dynamic value that will be evaluated during transcoding time or ingest time. For example, the width and the height of a media type is a dynamic value, and the file extension for thumbnail should always set to JPEG. In the path patterns, we can use these tokens to build up our folder structure. For example, if we have a look at the bottom here, the resolution, this is our resolution folder and exists of the resolution type, which is a value that we set manually, and two dynamic values, the width and the height, and these are depending on the media type that we are ingesting. We scroll down, we can see the path values, and here we define the resolution type, which is used in the folder names, as well as the color space and the file extension. Resolution type, color space. And these path patterns now define how the resolution folder looks like. If you want to learn more about the path patterns and path values, please check out the other video. In the library section, we can override parts of the global settings to be specific for that one library. For example, if we scroll down to the thumbnail transcoding template, we can see that we here override the extension to always be JPEG. And if we have a look at the proxy movie file, we can see that the extension is now always set to .mov. On the library level, we define the so-called template mappings. A template mapping bundles together certain transcoding templates, and these will be executed on ingest time or if we re-render proxy files. Click the button on the right to expand the view and to show all transcoding templates that are linked to this template mapping. The template mapping is what you see in the ingest view, and you can think of it as an ingest style, and you can have as many template mappings as you need to deal with different incoming source files. For example, you only want to copy from the source location to the element location, or you want to transcode the source file from a certain color space into a different color space. And here you can come up with as many template mappings as you need to deal with all these different scenarios. You can define different templates to treat files differently. For example, you want to define one template that always converts Rec 709 QuickTimes into linear EXR sequences, or another template that always converts DPX sequences from the logarithmic color space to linear EXRs. You can add a template, give it a name, for example, custom script, to trigger your existing scripts. The transcoding tasks are the tasks that will actually be executed on ingest time. You can select one of the presets, or you can use a custom command to run any command line job. For example, if you want to use Python and use your existing scripts, you can use the custom command line. And you can use the tokens to pass information from das element to the command line. For example, the path of the main file and the path of the thumbnail. Now you can create a new template mapping and assign your transcoding template to this template mapping. Expand the view and assign the transcoding templates for the different proxy files. Let's have another look at a transcoding template of the thumbnail. By default, it renders a resolution of 960 by 540. Let's say you want to have a different resolution. Duplicate the template, rename it to thumbnail HD, change the width and the height, assign this new thumbnail HD transcoding template for the thumbnails, and now your thumbnails will be rendered in a different resolution. And that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.